Hi guys, welcome to my presentation. I just want to start out with doing a welcome to country. I've got a bit of a lo-fi setup going here. I'm going to be switching between my computer view and my front speaker view. And so I'm just going to do this quickly. So I want to start with this. We acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kurna people today. I've got a bit of a music background, so I'm going to try. I think it brings an important element to my life. So I'm going to be including a little bit of music. Hopefully it's relevant. And I just would like to welcome PLC3. Welcome guys. Peter, Theo, Christian, Hui Min, Cohen and William. I think it's important to welcome you all here and make everybody feel welcome. So next up, my topic is adolescent needs. So I've been thinking a lot about what adolescents, their basic needs and what they need in a school setting and all this kind of thing. And I first thought, well, we all need a good stack of cash. It can come in handy, can't it? At times. What are our real sort of underlying basic needs as adolescents? In the words of the Rolling Stones, you might find sometimes we just get what we need, if we're lucky. So I want you to pause and reflect. What is that exactly? I think at this point I'd normally get you to brainstorm in pairs. I know we're all sort of isolated at the moment, so if you happen to be sharing your house with someone, they might do. And think about the needs of the adolescents in your classroom setting. Pause this video, have a little think, and come back. I'm sharing the house with an 8.5-year-old. I'm referring to him now as pre-adolescent, and I feel I'm seeing some adolescent needs evolving in him. So I asked him. But also, I'd just like to say I did quite a lot of research, and one thing I found, which you may think is funny, but you might not too, you may not agree with me, but after conducting extensive research, thanks Google, I have concluded that the most pressing adolescent need is a new iPhone 11 Plus. The biggest one. If you think about that. I'll get on to what Jude thought. What did Jude think? And so I got him to think about big kids, I referred to them as, just slightly older than him. And he said they need a home, lollies, friends, mummy and daddy, Xbox, toys. And I asked him about what about at school, in a school setting, what do you think they needs? And his answers there were more handball courts, a need to move the tree out of the sandpit, and a bigger playground. Which kind of brings to light a couple of important factors that are really going to come, hopefully, that are going to come out of this. Number one is relationships, and number two is play. somewhat intertwined, in my opinion. But there's a little video I've chosen for you to watch. It's 9 minutes. It's pretty funny, guys. So if you can go and take a moment to watch that now, that'd be really cool. You can find the link in the PowerPoint. Let's pause this up, go and give it a watch, then come back. I'll still be here. Now, what I've found from watching that little video, doing lots of other research, thinking this was important. He's a Swedish teacher, and he's demonstrated the needs very well for care and empathy on issues that can crop up that not particularly school related. There was that teeth issue where he took the extra time out to help that student out. He was building relationships by sharing his own story, which comes back to the relationship thing, which I'm going to be going on about a lot. And he was always supporting students with whatever they were going through. Another point which I wanted to touch on is that he's even built rapport with his viewing audience by including humour. That's a little thing that is probably going to crop up later in this presentation. An interesting thing as well, Joyce, I noticed that we talked about that time he was late getting to school because of the snow, and his own students had developed empathy and care, and he had a very inclusive way of looking at his students, which I think is a big thing. Yeah. So I moved on and looked at from a developmental psychologist point of view. Let's look at the science a bit and see what they say and what things they brought up. And I'll just go through these quickly. Number one being we are hardwired to connect. It gets back to the relationships. And the second thing that in an adolescent perspective, they're looking for a connection to a non-parent adult, which in this situation is the teacher. And then it brought up a lot of issues facing adolescents and their their behaviour, the risk taking. They're often consumed with self, consumed with negativity. It's a time of loss of their childhood. They're struggling with their identity, and some worrying statistics. 1 in 5 suffer from depression, and 1 in 6 have considered suicide. It leads me to sort of contemplate, what's going on here, and how are we supporting students with their needs. But this highlights the need for positive relationships with teachers. I'm just going to read this. Positive relationships with teachers are also deemed crucial and influential to students' learning. That's from the Education Evolution text, 2005. And they're saying that peer-to-peer relationships are important. It's the students to students. And what I've noted that, it's not always going to be easy to build relationships with your students. It's going to be a gamut of different types of students in your class. And many adolescents will have significant life events and issues that may present roadblocks to their education. And a good teacher is going to be vital for their development. So it led me to think about, what's a good teacher? How do we be that teacher that that adolescents need and deserve? So that led me on to looking at sort of research about what good teachers are. There's been lots of research into what makes a good teacher. But what I found interesting was that the research that underpins what is the widely accepted notion of a good teacher rarely includes a student's perspective. It suggested the following themes: the ability to create and sustain an emotionally supportive environment, setting high expectations, positive feedback and praise. And the researchers generally agree that a good teacher should know how to balance academic and personal dimensions in their profession on a daily basis. And the interesting point here was that most of this research rarely included what the students thought. There was a supplementary reading, one of the courseworks, and I started delving into that because there was a research done into a bunch of German students, and their perspectives were taken on what is a good teacher and what's a bad teacher, and the idea was that you could extract from those interviews, what adolescents need to form a good relationship. We'll continue here. So adolescents' views of teachers, characteristics, and what comprise a good and bad teacher give us powerful insights into what is important for developing these relationships. This is a fairly recent study in 2015 that we could use for starting points to build these relationships. So obviously it didn't just look at what were good teachers, it looked at what was bad teachers in their eyes. What did the research uncover? Now, it was generally broken down into three areas: the quality of student-teacher relationships, teaching expertise or the lack of, and teachers' personal characteristics. I'm just sort of starting out with the bad side so we can get that out of the way, and then look at what makes a good teacher in adolescents' eyes. But on the bad side, we've got injustice, antipathy, relational aggression as far as relationships concerned, which, if just things aren't happening in your classroom and the students see that, it's going to break down your relationships with them. And another important point in the teaching expertise science was indifference and disinterest. Like you've got to be passionate about what you teach. The kids know you can't fake it. And then if they see that you're not into it, it's going to, they're going to disengage from your class, and that's going to break down the relationship. And then another interesting point that's come up is the lack of assertiveness, which students perceived teachers to be good when they were able to be assertive. So I think it showed there's a balance needed to be able to foster this learning environment. You still need assertiveness, because if you had a lack of assertiveness in your classroom, then you were perceived as a bad teacher. Other things that came out: boring, repetitive, disinterested, showing favoritism, being inconsistent. We've got to make sure that we treat all students equally. That's very important. And at this point, I'd normally get you to take a moment to discuss in groups any experiences of bad teachers. I reflected on this a fair bit, and I've noticed that I couldn't really identify a bad teacher. I mean, I had strict teachers, which I never thought were bad when I was in primary school. It wasn't really till I got to adolescence and high school where I came across teachers I would refer to as bad. Now, what is a good teacher? Again, it gets broken down into 3 areas: the quality of the teacher-student relationship, teaching expertise, and teachers' personal characteristics. Now, all students mention that a good teacher not only imparts knowledge, but also interacts with them on a personal level. So, appreciation. Students talked extensively about their desire to be appreciated. I've even listed there as a need to show appreciation. Expressions of appreciation from teachers help them feel motivated and keep up their efforts. There's a quote from one of the students: "Teachers' appreciation involves encouragement, which aids to empower students to believe in themselves and feel more in control of their environment." Individual consideration. There's a couple of quotes here. Students expected teachers to consider their private concerns, and I think that was shown in the little video of the Swedish teacher, taking care when there were some issues that he could help out with in students' personal lives. So overall, most students needed to feel that teachers were not only concerned with their learning, but also with their personal needs. Sympathy. I'm going to, I'm mindful of time here now. I'm just going to go through here a bit quickly. But teachers were classified as good if the students' perceived relationships was characterised by mutual feelings of sympathy. When students perceive their teachers as nice and cheerful, they find more pleasure in attending classes. Because I get along with this teacher really well and talk with him even out of class, just because you have more fun in that subject. There's some quotes from students. All students in the survey also mentioned that the teaching expertise was important, but emphasised that the teacher's motivation, comprehensible teaching and flexibility during class were important. So students could be motivated by a passionate teacher. I'm trying to convey a tiny bit of passion here in my presentation. I hope it's coming across. So I think it's very important to understand these needs. And it's kind of helping them believe that the impossible is possible. If a teacher with glossy eyes tells us how interested she is, we are even more into it, said 14 years. He is also participating, he demonstrates it to us. Getting involved, being passionate again, comprehensible teaching. The students valued teachers' efforts to make dry and monotonous topics more engaging, thereby responding to their needs. Teachers' personal characteristics. All students in the survey spoke about the personality of a good teacher. Students particularly cherished a teacher's ability to foster a casual yet disciplined classroom environment. For example, by including humorous elements. I'm not sure if it's working out for me, but I have tried to include a tiny bit of humour in this presentation. I don't know if anyone's having a little bit of a laugh, but I thought I'll get back to what I asked Jude. Went back to my main man Jude and said, "What do you think, Jude? What makes a good teacher?" I asked him, and he said, "Well, all teachers have to be a bit strict, right?" And I was talking to him about his last teacher that he had. And I was like, well, what goes on in the classroom? And is there any good things, any bad things? And he said, well, she gets a disappointed face when you do something naughty. Sometimes she does some joking around, but you can't joke around all day. So he was aware of the fact that you know sometimes you've got to get down to business, but you can you can't be silly all day, but you can have a bit of fun here and there. And you could take a moment at this point to think about your own teachers and their qualities. Just reflect on that, and we'll press on. You can pause this for a second. I've got an intentionally left blank slate. I'm noticing now this presentation is taking a long time. So even though students wanted to get along with their teachers like friends, they still wanted them to retain their authority. According to the students, teachers could be strict as long as they were fair. The strictness allegedly sustains a healthy and adaptive environment. Good teachers get their class in order, says Jamie. And there is always a better vibe because they can be assertive and tell you more than the teachers. I guess it's a case of trying to be able to balance things, making everyone feel welcome and happy, and a bit of humour kind of lightens the mood in the classroom, gets everyone in that good learning frame of mind. This is where they got to. This is what I wanted to try and get across. There a US survey that showed that humour ranks in at number 1 for preferred teacher characteristics. The German students found it equally as important, but it wasn't quite at number 1. I think he came in at number 2 or 3. So my English teacher is really funny. When he's explaining stuff, he combines that with jokes so we can laugh about it. I think sometimes that they just have a good sense of humour. Humour just goes a long way in building positive relationships. And I'm trying to build a relationship here with you guys out there by modelling a tiny bit of this. Now let's keep going. Press on. Of course, there's all sorts of other needs that need to be looked at. Empathy. Students express the desire to be understood and accepted as individuals by their teachers. A couple of quotes there. The English teacher just understands us. He just has this understanding that other teachers don't have. When she sees that we have a text next lesson, good luck on the test. Just being aware of what your students are up to and what's going on in their lives, and just goes a long way to developing the relationship that you need with your students. So I started looking, okay, that was a German context. And there was a similar type of study done back in 2008 in rural Western Australia. Some interesting findings came out of that. A lot of them were very similar, but an interesting point that came up, that the overall students' perception of the school, if they had good teachers, they felt they were at a good school. So it just created an overall, good community feeling, starting with the teacher-student relationship. If that was kicked off positively, and all teachers could get in on that, all the students thought the school was good. Conversely, if the relationships there weren't good, they didn't view the school in a positive light. And I noticed one quote from the Australian survey there: if they did not have a good teacher, they wouldn't try. Very, very powerful little note, isn't it? The impact that the relationship, and thinking about the perception of from a student's, adolescent's perspective of what is a good teacher, implores us to try and be the best teachers we can. And I wanted to touch on this just quickly. One student described in Year 9, he had the worst teacher ever in maths, and that had stuffed me up for the rest of my maths education. And I've got there a note to self talking about my physics teacher. So, Mr. Marazinski, you screwed up my physics education. That's what happened. Year 10 had a really bad physics teacher. I don't know what happened, but we just didn't get along. And then I ended up dropping out of physics. And in some ways it may have been good because it got picked up with music. That was my replacement. But at a certain point in my later on career, having studied and not done well in physics really set me back in certain areas. And I think the important point there is that you can really affect a student's life just from that, that the relationship has far-reaching effects in students' lives. Many participants describe how the outcomes of courses subjects were highly dependent on who teaches you and what teachers make and that teachers make a huge difference. Just a couple of little statements from the Aussie kids. They help make our dreams come true. These are good teachers. Good teachers are hell good, and teachers inspire you. It's no joke, mate. But the number one personal qualities that came out of the Aussie research was a good sense of humour. When a teacher was able to be fun and tell funny stories, participants particularly welcomed teachers who could have a joke and also take a joke. Other qualities that they deemed important were trustworthiness, a sense of safety, and respect for students. I mean, it just boils down to being an all-round kind of decent human. But if we're aware that these things are important to students, we can kind of tailor our pedagogical methods and so on. And not to be afraid to include a bit of humour and also be firm when needed in the class and take on board what adolescents themselves think, because it's ultimately what they need for their learning. I'm going to just jet through this because I'm just wary of time. Other positive qualities, passionate about what they do, we'll touch on this. But so what my main thing here is that the Australian kids, not too different from the Germans, friendly, make things equal, showing respect. What the Australian kids didn't like, showing no respect, being inconsistent, untrustworthy, showing favouritism. There's nothing really new there, just the similar to, I just wanted to bring up the point that from an Australian context, the kids are somewhat the same. And I also found this was interesting. I looked at some studies in the US, and number one there again, sense of humour, interesting lessons, and having a good subject knowledge. So this led me to think about, are schools catering to the needs of adolescents? Are we catering? Relationships being the key thing, and I see the two types of relationships, the student-teacher and also the student-student relationships. And I wanted to get on to talking about building student-student relationships, and I've done quite a bit of research into play and how that ultimately fosters learning environments. We'll just talk about this for a minute. There's a little video I wouldn't mind if you can. It's fairly short, from Dr. Peter Gray, who's a psychologist from Boston College. His take there is play is not wasted time. Learning how to get our needs met whilst meeting the needs of others. The 4 characteristics of play. And so, I guess I'll just recap on this for you, those who haven't watched that video. And he's talking about free play, in that it's self-chosen and self-directed play. You engage in that kind of play simply because you want to. It's an important point that he brought up in his video is that all play, even if it's free and unstructured, ends up having some form of structure, which is, it comes from the children who are engaging in play. There's something, they always have their little rules about what's going on, and I strongly believe that through watching my own son and him interacting, that play is an incredibly powerful way to encourage student relationships, and the main thing that kids need when they are playing is simply other kids. We can think they need to go and play a game of soccer or whatnot, and so I think I've got another little slide here. I wanted to get on talk about Mother Nature's pedagogy. The study of mammals and so on, all young mammals through into their adolescence, they all engage in play. And ultimately, playing, from their perspective, it allows them to develop skills that are no doubt going to allow them to possibly survive in the future, being able to dodge a lion or whatever. Learning these skills, and what I'm trying to emphasise, if you haven't seen the videos from Dr. Gray, is that evolutionary wise, or natural selection, so play is our way of educating. So there's a need to play, because it's going to allow us to get educated and learn the things that we need. So there's this drive to play in all young mammals, and indeed humans ourselves. We have the most to learn, and that play is that just inner drive that's come through from Mother Nature, in my belief, that enables us to engage and learn, and it's that self-directed, self-chosen play that has the greatest educative perspective. Now, the decline of play. Now, this Dr. Gray's looked into a lot of studies and historical work, and there's been a gradual decrease in play since the 1950s. And he wanted to make the point that there's also been a corresponding increase in depression and mental health orders from 1% up to around 8%, and that it doesn't correlate with wars, the divorce rate, or they haven't been able to correlate it with anything else. And also an interesting increase in the diagnosis for ADHD, which the medications often decrease the drive to play. And the question that he sort of rose was that, or point that he was trying to make, is that the decrease in play has effectively resulted, in an increase in adolescent mental health issues. So we've got here a little graph showing the decrease in play and an increase. Let me just show you that slide again. The children should fit the school, or the school should fit the children. Schools have become an abnormal setting. We're becoming more and more obsessed with standardised testing. And I guess the point I'm wanting to get across, being why I've gone way over time, is that we're not really valuing play as much. I've seen that in my own son's school. He's just tapping at the window now, trying to distract me. Recently, we got a letter, a newsletter item sent home that said that the schoolyard needed to be vacated by 3:20 because they couldn't be responsible for all the kids there. And my heart sank a little, thinking, well, it's one of the great opportunities for kids to play after school and engage in, we're not seeing the educative power of play. And the Dr. Gray looked at a bunch of anthropological studies which basically identified that, thought about, well, in hunter-gatherer cultures, how do kids get educated? How do they learn what they need to learn to, go on and function into adulthood? And his point was that kids identify the tools of a culture and will play at those tools, if they're given the chance, and learn how to master them. And then, they're naturally drawn to the tools of a culture. So, led me to reflect, what are the tools of our culture? Obviously, computers and things like this are big, essential things in our culture, and you can see why kids are probably drawn to playing with this kind of technology, because they see it as central to functioning in our society. And so I thought was starting to think about, well, how can we enable more play? And the interesting thing about that picture there, it says no ball games, but unfortunately got cut off. But over the side here is a couple of other kids, and they're actually playing with the sign that says no ball games. It's like they're throwing it around. I thought it's like, even though you try to take play away from kids, they need it, and they're going to it's a basic need of adolescence. We seem to value it in the younger years, but it seems to disappear somewhat. And I was thinking, well, how could I enable more play and what's called free play or self-directed play in my classroom setting? And I came up with a couple of ideas. Opening up schools or places to play after school hours, enabling free access to gymnasium, making OSH affordable. And notice, the OSH is a really great place for kids to get involved in free play, but making sure the staff understand about the power of free play. You know, my own specialty, making music rooms available for maybe jam sessions, allowing students to experiment with open-ended music play. So play is nature's means of acquiring the skills we need to progress into adulthood. Unstructured play has the educative power, and not structured adult design games. And I guess that's the point there about the unstructured play, is that the kids or adolescents are going to be negotiating the rules. They're going to have to be showing empathy and learning how to get their own needs met whilst balancing meeting the needs of their peers. It's teaching them all sorts of things that just can't be taught in any other way. So the benefits of play. Play is where they learn they are in control. Play is where they learn to solve their own problems. Play is where they experience joy. Play is where they learn to get along with their peers. Play is where they get to see others' points of view, and play is where they get to practice empathy. Now, in our current situation of us all being isolated, I was thinking, the saving grace of kids being able to, play and socialise is really, we seem to somewhat shy away from adolescents using social media, and there can be a lot of negative views around gaming technology, and but I think we underestimate the power of the social side of the gaming technology and stuff like that. They're able to interact with their peers and play at these these learning experiences of interacting with their peers. So my main take homes that I wanted you to get out of this, I don't know if you can be still watching, but bring play back. Adolescents need it. And alongside the 3 R's, this is the quote, the teacher-student relationship is equally important. Interpersonal relationships are a prerequisite to academic relationships. Now we've got to the end. I just wanted to finish with a couple of quotes from Hattie, 2009. That learning is optimised when students and teachers can build a relationship that balances their roles and being dimensions. So we've got to find ways to, be that good teacher that an adolescent needs, whilst, in my opinion, promoting their peer-to-peer connections, and I feel that there's a great need, I hope I've demonstrated it, for play, and it's worrying to see that there has been this decline, and I've hoped you've enjoyed the presentation. And Jude, just wanted to say, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And there's a couple of cool videos. I'll be uploading the PowerPoint with some references and so on. And everybody stay safe, and I hope to see you in a Zoom session soon.